feeling lost in the valley. Psalm 23 brings the peace you've been desperately searching for. There are moments when the soul reaches a point of quiet exhaustion, a place where even the simplest decisions feel heavy and every step forward seems uncertain. If you are standing in such a moment now, wondering why life feels so dim and why the path ahead has lost its shape, hear this truth that refuses to let you go. You are not walking unseen. You are not wandering alone. Something within you is still searching for a voice that can steady your heart, a presence strong enough to guide you through the shadows you have been carrying in silence. This valley you are facing may look like confusion or grief, or the slow weariness that has been building inside you for far too long. It may feel as if the world has moved ahead while you remain stuck in a landscape you never chose. You may have prayed and received no clear answer, hoped and found no clear direction, believed and yet felt no relief. That ache, that deep question about where God is in all of this, becomes harder to ignore when the silence feels louder than comfort. Yet this valley is not the end of your story. There is a sacred message waiting for you, one that speaks directly into this quiet desperation. Psalm 23 holds a kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances or clarity. It reaches into the fear behind your questions and offers something steady, real, and deeply human. It does not deny the valley, it meets you within it. Its words carry the tenderness of a God who does not shout from a distance, but walks beside you with gentle certainty, guiding you through places that once felt impossible to face. Throughout this journey, you will discover why these ancient lines still breathe hope into modern hearts, how they restore the strength that sorrow has drained, and what it truly means to be held by a shepherd who never abandons his own. You will see your struggle with new eyes, and you will find the beginning of a path that leads toward rest, clarity, and quiet restoration. To understand why this psalm speaks so powerfully into seasons of confusion and loss, we first need to recognize the weight the human heart carries when it feels lost. When life unsettles the heart, it rarely announces itself with clarity. Instead, it arrives quietly, weaving itself into your days, until one morning you realize that something inside you no longer feels steady. You wake with a weight you cannot name. You move through your responsibilities with a mind that feels scattered. You try to pray, but your words fall flat, and the silence that follows only deepens the ache you were trying to escape. This is the kind of struggle that does not shout, it whispers, and its whispers often carry the heaviest questions. There are seasons when the soul feels stretched thin, pulled between what you expected life to be and the reality you are trying to accept. You may feel overwhelmed by decisions that once felt simple, or discouraged by a future that no longer looks familiar. Even the people around you may not understand how fragile you feel beneath the surface. You present a steady face, but inside there is a tiredness that keeps growing, a sense that your inner compass has begun to spin without direction. Sometimes this struggle takes the form of emotional exhaustion, the quiet burnout that comes from carrying burdens for too long without a space to set them down. Other times it feels like spiritual confusion, a subtle distance between your heart and the God you once felt close to. You begin to wonder if you misheard his voice, if you strayed without noticing, or if he simply stepped back and left you to figure out the path alone. That question becomes heavier with time. Where is God when life becomes unclear? There is also the struggle hidden beneath grief. Even if you are functioning, moving, working, and speaking, something inside you may still be mourning a loss others cannot see. A relationship that broke, a dream that faded, a season that ended too soon. The valley becomes more than a metaphor. It becomes the landscape of your inner world, a place where you feel the absence of what once gave you joy or stability. For some, the struggle expresses itself as anxiety. The mind loops through unanswered questions, rehearses every possible outcome, and tries to control what cannot be controlled. Your body responds with tension, your heart with restlessness, and your spirit with a quiet fear that you are drifting without an anchor. Even faith can begin to feel like something you are trying to hold rather than something holding you. Others carry the weight of responsibility. You are trying to care for people, make decisions, support others, and stay strong, while a part of you longs for someone to simply tell you that it is going to be all right. You may be surrounded by people and still feel alone. You may be giving encouragement to others while wishing someone would offer the same to you. The hardest part of this struggle is often the silence. Not the silence in your home or your environment, but the silence inside your own prayer life. You speak, you seek, you ask for guidance, yet you feel as if heaven has gone still. The absence of answers begins to feel like the absence of God. And in that space, the valley feels deeper, the shadows feel longer, and the journey feels lonelier than you expected. Yet the human heart is not only exhausted, it is searching. Beneath every fear and doubt is a longing for someone who sees you fully and still chooses to walk beside you. A longing for a gentle voice that can settle your inner storms. A longing for reassurance that you are not wandering without purpose. These desires are not signs of weakness. They are signs of the soul reaching for the one who created it. This is the struggle that Psalm 23 speaks into with such tenderness. It does not pretend that the valley is imaginary or exaggerated. It acknowledges that life can bruise the spirit, confuse the mind, and drain the heart. Yet it also reveals something deeper, that the valley is not a sign of abandonment, but a place where God chooses to draw near with unusual closeness. To understand just how powerful this message is, we need to look at the world and the heart behind the psalm itself, the setting and the voice that shaped these words that continue to speak across centuries. To understand the depth of Psalm 23, it helps to step briefly into the world from which it was born, not with academic detachment, but with the same tenderness and simplicity with which the psalm was first prayed. These words were shaped by a man who understood both wilderness and wonder, both danger and divine companionship. David knew the weight of responsibility, the ache of loneliness, and the fragile nature of human strength. Before he was a king, he was a shepherd, spending long stretches of time in quiet fields where survival depended on attentiveness, courage, and gentle guidance. In the ancient world, the image of a shepherd was not sentimental. It was a vocation that demanded vigilance. Sheep were vulnerable to steep terrain, unpredictable storms, and predators that moved in silence. A shepherd led with presence, not distance. He walked ahead of the flock to clear the path, and behind it to guard the weak. He carried tools, not for show, but for protection and rescue. Every step was taken with the understanding that the flock's life depended on his guidance. This is the world that shaped David's language. When he called God a shepherd, he was not choosing poetic imagery. He was speaking from lived experience, drawing from nights under open skies when every sound mattered, and from days when he learned that care is measured not in words, but in consistent presence. To David, God was not a distant ruler issuing commands from above. God was the one who walked beside him, guiding, guarding, and restoring him through terrain that his own strength could never navigate alone. The psalm was likely written during a time when David faced uncertainty or danger, perhaps when he was fleeing from enemies or wrestling with internal turmoil. Instead of offering a theological explanation, he offered an intimate confession of trust, shaped not by comfort but by dependence. These 6 verses are not triumph after victory. They are peace in the middle of vulnerability. They are clarity in the middle of confusion. They are rooted in the lived truth that God's presence is not limited to sacred spaces or moments of strength, but extends into every valley, every shadow, every trembling step. Understanding this context helps us hear the psalm as it was meant to be heard, not as a distant promise, but as a present reality. It was written by someone who knew the valley well, someone who understood fear and uncertainty, someone who learned that God's care is not theory but companionship. The words are simple because the truth they carry is meant to reach the tired, the fragile, and the uncertain without requiring them to climb toward understanding. With this in mind, the psalm opens itself like a gentle doorway. its meaning becomes more than poetry. It becomes a map of trust for anyone who has ever felt lost, overwhelmed, or unsure of their next step. And now, with this perspective in place, we can begin to uncover the central message of the psalm, the heartbeat that has comforted generations and continues to speak directly into the valleys we face today. Psalm 23 begins with a declaration so simple and so complete that it reshapes the entire posture of the heart. The Lord is my shepherd, not a distant force, not a symbolic comfort, not an abstract idea to be admired from afar. A shepherd, a guide who knows the terrain of your life more intimately than you know it yourself. These words announce a relationship built on care, protection, and presence. They reveal a God who does not wait for you to find the way on your own, but takes responsibility for leading you through landscapes you cannot navigate without him. In this single line, David replaces fear with belonging. He replaces uncertainty with the quiet assurance that you are held by someone who will not abandon you halfway. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. These images are more than poetic comfort. They describe the condition of a soul restored to peace. Green pastures are not rushed places. They are spaces where the heart finally exhales, where striving loosens its grip, where the noise of life no longer overwhelms the inner world. Still waters represent calm that reaches the deepest layers of your being. They reflect a God who recognizes the exhaustion you hide and invites you into rest long before you admit that you need it. In these moments, the psalm teaches that God's care is not only about rescue, it is about renewal. It is about giving you back the strength you have lost along the way. He restores my soul. This is the gentle work God does in the quiet spaces of your life. Restoration is not a quick fix. It is a steady realignment of what has been bent by fear, disappointment, or fatigue. To restore the soul means to bring it back to its original posture of trust, hope, and clarity. It means God is not merely patching the broken places. He is returning you to the truth of who you are and who He has always been. This restoration is not earned, it is given. It flows from the shepherd's heart, not from your performance. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Here, the psalm shifts toward direction. God does not simply comfort you, He guides you. The paths of righteousness are not rigid moral lines, but steady steps that align your life with purpose and goodness. When God leads, He does so with intent. Every turn, every delay, every unknown path is shaped by His wisdom. The phrase "for His name's sake" means you are guided not because you always know what to do, but because God's character is faithful. He leads you because He is good. He leads you because He is committed to you. He leads you because your life is held within His promises. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. This is the moment where the psalm enters the reality we all understand. The valley is not avoided, it is acknowledged. There are seasons when the shadows are long, when fear presses close, when the future feels fragile. Yet the psalm does something extraordinary. It shifts the language from he to you. In the valley, God becomes more intimate, more near, more directly involved. The shepherd is no longer described from afar. He is addressed directly. Your presence becomes the anchor. You are with me becomes the courage that carries the heart through danger. This is the core of the psalm, not the absence of shadows, but the presence of God within them. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. In ancient shepherding, the rod was a tool of protection, the staff a tool of guidance. One defended the sheep from threat, the other drew them back when they drifted toward danger. Together, they represent the balance of God's care, a power that shields and a gentleness that leads. Comfort does not come from the removal of hardship. It comes from knowing that you are watched over, defended, and kept within reach by a love that refuses to let you wander beyond His care. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. This image carries profound meaning. A table was not simply a place to eat. It was a symbol of belonging, acceptance, and honor. To have a table prepared in the presence of enemies means God blesses you openly even when life is still threatening. It means He gives you provision, dignity, and peace in places where you once expected fear. He does not wait for your circumstances to resolve. He provides even in the tension. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Anointing was a sign of favor, calling, and healing. Overflowing abundance is not merely physical blessing. It is the experience of a heart so deeply aware of God's presence that it recognizes His generosity even in small moments. It is the quiet joy that emerges when you realize you are held by a love that gives more than necessity and stays longer than crisis. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. These are not passive companions. They are active forces pursuing you, surrounding you, shaping your days with divine tenderness. Goodness speaks to God's provision. Mercy speaks to His compassion. Together they form a promise that your life will not be defined by fear, but by the pursuit of God's faithful love. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This final line is not about a distant heaven alone. It is about living in God's presence now and always. It is the assurance that every valley, every rest, every struggle, every moment of restoration is leading you deeper into a relationship that does not end. You are not passing through this life alone. You are being led home, step by step, by a shepherd who knows your name. With this understanding, the psalm opens itself as more than poetry. It becomes a compass for the weary, a promise for the uncertain, and a quiet voice guiding you toward peace. Now that its meaning has been illuminated, we can begin to explore how these truths speak directly into the world you are living in today. The words of Psalm 23 move with surprising clarity into the world we face today because the human heart has not changed. We still long for guidance when life becomes confusing. We still hunger for rest when our thoughts grow loud and relentless. We still carry wounds that no one sees and responsibilities that quietly drain us. When David speaks of green pastures and still waters, he is describing something every modern soul desperately needs. A place where inner pressure softens, where the mind quiets, and where the heart remembers that it is not meant to carry life alone. In a world that moves faster than our spirits can follow, these verses invite us to step out of the noise and into a kind of rest that is both sacred and necessary. When God leads you beside still waters, it is not a promise that life will slow its pace or that challenges will disappear. It is an invitation to anchor yourself in moments of intentional quiet, even in the middle of responsibility. Stillness in modern life is rarely handed to you. It must be chosen. It can begin with a simple pause at the start of the day, a breath that acknowledges God's presence before you step into the demands waiting for you. It can take shape in small nighttime rituals that allow your spirit to release what it cannot control. These simple practices are not escapes from reality. They are ways of letting God restore the parts of you that fatigue has worn thin. Green pastures look different in our world. They may be found in quiet prayer, in a whispered acknowledgement of God when your mind feels scattered, or in stepping away from the constant flow of information long enough to hear the gentle truth that you are more than your productivity. The shepherd invites you to lie down, not because you have finished everything, but because he knows your soul needs rest before your tasks are completed. In moments of pressure, returning to this truth becomes an act of trust. Rest becomes worship. Stillness becomes surrender. He restores my soul speaks directly to the loneliness many people carry today. You may be surrounded by others, yet feel unseen. You may be successful outwardly, yet feel fragile inside. Restoration in this context means allowing God to rebuild the parts of you that disappointment, comparison, and silent grief have eroded. Many people today struggle with a quiet sense of inadequacy, a belief that they must hold their lives together perfectly or risk being left behind. But restoration is the opposite of self-reliance. It is the graceful acceptance that God is repairing what life has broken. slowly and faithfully, without demanding that you pretend to be stronger than you feel. In Paths of Righteousness, the psalm speaks to direction, something many hearts long for in a world where choices often feel overwhelming. You may be trying to discern the right step in your career, relationships, or personal life. You may feel suspended between what you hope for and what you fear. God's leading is rarely a lightning strike of certainty. It often comes through gentle alignment, the quiet sense that a certain path brings peace while another path stirs unrest. When you seek God's guidance with an open heart, you begin to notice subtle shifts within yourself. You may feel nudged toward honesty in a situation where you've been silent. You may feel prompted to let go of something that drains you or to take a step that requires courage. These movements of the heart are often how the shepherd guides his people today. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death speaks powerfully into modern anxiety. Many people carry fears that are not spoken aloud. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of the future, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. These fears create inner valleys that feel as threatening as any external danger. Yet the psalm assures you that God's presence is not conditioned by your emotional state. He does not draw near only when you feel strong. He draws near precisely when your fears are loudest. Courage does not come from eliminating fear. It comes from recognizing who walks with you in the dark. When you feel overwhelmed, you can speak directly to God, as David did. "You are with me" becomes a quiet anchor in moments where everything else feels uncertain. "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me" brings clarity to the way God protects and guides you today. Protection does not always mean removing the struggle. Sometimes it means God redirecting you before you wander into something harmful, even when you do not recognize the danger. At other times, it means God strengthening you to face what you cannot avoid. Guidance often comes through conviction, through a gentle inner pull or a sudden moment of clarity that turns you away from choices that would drain your peace. The shepherd's tools still work in the modern world. They appear in the small, quiet movements of the heart that pull you back toward truth. "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies" speaks to the tension of living. In a world where challenges do not disappear simply because we pray, God offers moments of peace, provision, and dignity even while you are still facing external pressures. You may not see the full resolution of a situation, yet God sets a place for you in the midst of it. He offers small joys, meaningful conversations, unexpected encouragement, and divine reminders that your value is not diminished by adversity. This table is not a place of escape. It is a place of reassurance. It is God's way of saying that hardship does not have the authority to define your identity. "You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows" translates into the experience of noticing God's generosity in everyday life. In modern settings, this may look like the sudden realization that you are being carried by grace, that you are receiving more support, strength, or peace than you expected. Overflows are not always grand or dramatic. They often appear in small mercies that remind you that God is near. Recognizing these moments trains the heart to live with gratitude, and gratitude opens the door to a deeper sense of God's presence. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life" speaks to the fear of the future. Many people today live under the weight of uncertainty, always bracing for what might go wrong. This verse invites you to live with expectation instead of fear. Goodness will meet you. Mercy will meet you. Not occasionally, but consistently. When you embrace this truth, the future becomes less threatening. You are not stepping into the unknown alone. You are stepping into a story already filled with God's pursuit. "And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever" affirms the deepest longing of modern life, a sense of belonging that cannot be shaken. To dwell with God means to live from a place of groundedness, to move through the world with the assurance that you have a home in His presence wherever you go. This truth carries you through stress, decision-making, relational struggles, and seasons of uncertainty. It becomes the foundation beneath your steps. When the ancient words of Psalm 23 are lived out in daily life, they become more than comforting poetry. They become a spiritual rhythm. They become a way of seeing the world. They become a quiet practice of trust that slowly reshapes how you think, feel, and move through your days. To deepen this even further, it helps to understand how these spiritual truths connect with the way the mind and heart respond to fear, rest, and peace. The soul and the mind often speak in the same language, even when we do not realize it. What touches the spirit also shapes the nervous system, and what unsettles the mind can dim the light of faith for a time. Psalm 23 understands this without using psychological terms. Its images and rhythms gently mirror the very processes that calm the human heart when fear or confusion take hold. When David speaks of green pastures and still waters, he is describing more than spiritual rest. He is offering imagery that soothes the mind, slows the breath, and helps the body release tension it has been holding quietly for too long. Fear has a way of narrowing your focus until you can only see what threatens you. It tightens the muscles, quickens the breath, and convinces you that you must act, fix, or control everything at once. In these moments, the valley feels darker than it truly is. The mind begins to anticipate danger even where none exists. Yet, when the psalm invites you to imagine still waters or a shepherd guiding your steps, it gently interrupts this cycle. It gives the mind a new picture to hold, one that signals safety instead of danger, presence instead of abandonment. This shift may seem small, but it can soften the intensity of fear and allow your thoughts to settle. He restores my soul aligns beautifully with the emotional process of recovery. Restoration is not a sudden return to strength. It is the gradual release of shame, pressure, and self-criticism. Many people today carry a quiet heaviness because they believe they must be strong at all times. They push themselves toward perfection, fearing that any sign of weakness will make them less worthy. This internal pressure builds until the heart grows weary. Yet restoration invites vulnerability, not performance. When you allow God to speak into your exhaustion, the mind begins to soften its harsh inner dialogue. You learn to treat yourself with the same kindness God extends to you, and this shift in self-talk becomes a powerful tool for emotional healing. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death reveals something essential. Danger feels more threatening when you feel alone. Anxiety often intensifies when you believe you must face everything with your own strength. The moment you remember that someone is with you, the weight begins to loosen. The valley may not change immediately, but your experience within it transforms. The presence of the shepherd becomes the inner assurance that reduces the mind's instinct to spiral. Courage grows not from the absence of fear, but from the awareness that your steps are guided and your heart is watched over. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me, mirrors the psychological need for both protection and guidance. Humans feel safest when they know they are defended and directed. Without protection, fear rises. Without guidance, confusion takes over. The shepherd provides both. The rod represents safety, the deep need to know that someone stronger than your fear is standing beside you. The staff represents direction, the reassurance that you will not wander into danger unnoticed. When you understand this balance, the mind relaxes its constant vigilance. You begin to trust that you are not responsible for controlling every outcome. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, speaks to the emotional experience of reclaiming peace while stress still surrounds you. Modern life rarely offers a moment free of pressure, yet the psalm teaches that peace does not depend on perfect circumstances. It arises from knowing that God provides even when challenges remain. This reframes the emotional landscape. Instead of waiting for life to calm down before you rest, you begin to rest in God as life unfolds. The mind learns to anchor itself in gratitude rather than in fear. My cup overflows reflects the psychological impact of noticing goodness. Gratitude is known to shift the brain's focus away from threat and toward hope. When you begin to recognize even the smallest signs of God's presence, your emotional world expands. The heart becomes more resilient. The mind grows more balanced. The soul becomes more receptive to peace. This practice is not forced optimism. It is the quiet discipline of recognizing that God is nearer than your fears want you to believe. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life speaks directly to the fear of the future. Much anxiety arises from imagining what could go wrong. This verse teaches the mind to expect goodness rather than disaster. It gently rewires the heart to trust that what lies ahead is shaped by God's faithfulness, not by randomness or fate. When you live with this expectation, the future becomes a place of possibility rather than dread. Psychology can describe the mechanics of fear and peace, but Psalm 23 gives them meaning. It offers a path where the emotional, mental, and spiritual layers of your life come together into a single, steady truth. You are held, you are guided, and you are not walking alone. And when these truths begin to take root within you, something inside starts to change. A quiet transformation begins, one that reshapes the way you see yourself, your circumstances, and the God who walks beside you. Transformation does not arrive with a sudden burst of clarity. It begins quietly, often in the same places where fear once spoke the loudest. When the truths of Psalm 23 begin to settle into the heart, change rises from within, not as an emotional high, but as a steady realignment of the soul. You start to notice subtle shifts. The same circumstances that once overwhelmed you no longer hold the same power. The valley may still surround you, but something in you is different. You begin to walk through life with a new steadiness, a calm that does not depend on understanding every step ahead. One of the first signs of transformation is the softening of inner tension. As you embrace the truth that God is your shepherd, the pressure to carry everything alone begins to loosen. Decisions that once felt paralyzing become more bearable because you trust that you are not expected to navigate them by your own strength. The shepherd's presence becomes a quiet anchor. You start to release the need for perfect answers and learn to move with the confidence that you are guided, even when the path is not fully visible. You may also begin to notice a deeper patience forming within you. Transformation teaches you to stop rushing your healing and to stop demanding instant resolutions. Instead, you learn to rest in the pace of God's timing, understanding that growth often happens below the surface, long before it becomes visible. This patience is not passive. It is a form of trust. It is the willingness to believe that God is working in ways you cannot yet see, shaping your steps and strengthening your heart through every valley you face. Another sign of transformation is the quiet rise of courage. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but a steady willingness to take steps of faith even when you feel uncertain. This courage grows each time you remember that the shepherd walks with you. You begin to face fears with a different posture, knowing that the presence of God does not eliminate danger but transforms the way you move through it. The shadows lose their dominance. The valley loses its authority. You no longer walk as someone abandoned. You walk as someone accompanied. The heart also becomes more receptive to small moments of goodness. Transformation sharpens your awareness of God's generosity. You begin to recognize blessings you once overlooked, and these moments deepen your sense of gratitude. Gratitude, in turn, opens the door to hope. Hope is not wishful thinking. It is the certainty that God's goodness and mercy are moving toward you. This expectation reshapes the emotional landscape of your life, allowing peace to take root even in seasons of uncertainty. Transformation also brings clarity, not always in the form of specific answers, but in the form of inner alignment. You start to sense what leads you toward peace and what pulls you away from it. You become more attuned to the shepherd's voice guiding you toward choices that reflect wisdom, compassion, and integrity. This clarity becomes a compass, helping you move through daily decisions with a heart that is grounded rather than distracted. And perhaps most profoundly, transformation deepens your sense of belonging. The final promise of the psalm, to dwell in the presence of God, becomes more than a distant hope. It becomes a lived experience. You begin to understand that no valley is strong enough to remove you from God's care. No confusion is deep enough to hide you from His sight. No fear is loud enough to silence His voice. You start to live each day with the quiet assurance that you are held within a love that does not falter. This transformation is not a destination reached once and for all. It is a journey, a slow unfolding of trust, peace, and renewed strength. And as these changes take root, the heart becomes ready to receive the final gift of this reflection. A prayer that gathers everything you have felt, everything you have carried, and everything God has spoken along the way. Holy Shepherd, look upon the heart that stands before you now. You see every burden it carries, every fear it hides, every question it whispers in the quiet moments no one else notices. Draw near with the gentleness that defines your presence. Lift the weight that is pressed so heavily on the spirit. Breathe peace into the places where anxiety has taken root. Restore the strength that is slowly drained away through long days and sleepless nights. Let this heart feel the steady reassurance that you are here, guiding each step with a love that does not falter. Walk with the one who stands in the valley, and let your presence become their courage. Surround them with protection when shadows rise, and remind them that they are never alone, not for a moment. Let your goodness and mercy follow them with quiet persistence, reshaping the way they see the path before them. Pour healing into the memories that still ache and clarity into the questions that remain unanswered. Teach their soul to rest in you, to trust in you, and to find in your voice the comfort they have been longing for. May their days be filled with signs of your nearness, and their nights with the peace that only you can give. If this message touched your heart, I invite you to share in the comments how Psalm 23 speaks to your journey today. Your words may become a blessing to someone who is walking through their own valley. If you wish to continue receiving reflections that deepen your faith and strengthen your spirit, you are welcome to subscribe and stay connected. May the Shepherd who knows your name guide you, hold you, and lead you toward quiet waters in every season of your life.